We're back at the ASC Clubhouse to dive deeper into their camera museum collection. In part 1, we got our hands on some of the earliest cameras in film history, and in part 2, we'll be taking a look at large formats, including Cinerama, VistaVision, and the early anamorphic lens adapters. The first thing I want to say about this is, I love this tripod. Looks like something out of a sci-fi movie.
This is called the Stomp Up tripod, right? It's a hydraulic tripod that allows you to this very heavy camera. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a real problem trying to adjust it. You really couldn't adjust it easily on a wooden tripod, which are the tripods that were used in that era. So they came up with this hydraulic sort of a lift, which actually is the predecessor of modern day dollies, if you think about it, because there's a hydraulic lift on the dolly,
DNA,
right?
Yeah.
Todd AO company, so named because Mike Todd, the producer, who was Elizabeth Taylor's husband at the time, came up with this 65 millimeter film camera. Okay, it's for widescreen photography, and it created an extraordinary image. I mean, if you've ever seen The Sound of Music, for instance, this very camera shot that movie.
Wow.
Right? This camera shot Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor. This is the Todd AO camera number 1. This is the very beginning.
So this is as the industry's getting into large format for spectacular movies like
Yeah, well, something crazy happened in the 1950s. People stopped going into the movie theaters. Business fell right off. And the exhibitors and the studios, what the hell's going on? Well, they found out that rather than getting dressed up really nice and getting the kids together and going and spending money at the theater and buying popcorn and seeing your friends and your enemies and whoever, you could stay at home and sit on the sofa and watch I Love Lucy, right? So that tore a hole in the industry. So there had to be something that could get the people back in. And what the consensus finally was widescreen. The image to that point had been a 4x3 shape, which early on was called the postage stamp, right? But it's a square image, much like the televisions were up until the early 2000s, right? So this broke the mold for that widescreen stuff. And this camera, as I said, shoots 65 millimeter film. And I think we could have a look in here. You can see that it says BFC number 1.
Wow.
Big F camera number 1. This is the 65 millimeter negative. So here you can see it's a regular Mitchell camera type of a movement, albeit way bigger. Right? And here you can see the 65 millimeter negative as it's traveling through. It comes down out of the magazine, runs around the capstan here, up and through the movement. This is called the movement. And the specific area where film goes through the lens and hits the film is called the gate. Okay. Right? And then it's exposed, and then the shutter closes, and the film advances to allow an unexposed portion, and then the shutter opens again. So that's the system. And it's really extraordinary. These cameras, the Mitchell cameras, were designed in 1919, 1920, and the design didn't really change. It continued on up and through the Panavision cameras. And I'll show you a Panavision camera in just a minute that looks almost identical to this, and it was made around 2000.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and this is made around 1919, this style.
You were saying this camera still runs.
Absolutely. One thing about these machines, if you give them a little bit of oil and you turn them over every now and then, they'll continue shooting forever. And this camera could shoot a motion picture right now. The difference in this process and a modern process is when you're shooting onto an SD card or something similar, your image goes onto that, and then you can immediately put it into a computer and start editing away, right? This requires a lot of steps. First of all, you have to purchase a negative. Then you have to expose that negative. Then that negative has to go to the laboratory, right? Then that negative, once it's been processed, needs to be either made into a print or transferred into a digital format, one of the two. So there are a lot more steps, a lot more cost.
Right.
And that's really what has ended up pretty much ending the film era of motion picture photography because of the expense.
Yeah.
Again, they're always trying to figure out how to make it faster and cheaper, right? Yeah. That's the goal.
So this is a Mitchell. Bell and Howell, from what I understand, they were, for a little while, they were the camera in Hollywood.
No, that's exactly right. After the wooden cameras, like the Pathé.
Yeah.
The Bell & Howell camera was the absolute finest achievement in motion picture camera that existed. As a matter of fact, that design was so fine that that camera continued working up until the early 2000s as an optical camera because of the stabilization of the image. What happened with the Bell & Howell camera is that as the film moved down in the gate, the film was actually pushed onto registration pins that were built into the camera. The shutter would open up, that frame was exposed, then the film was pulled off of those pins and moved down for the next exposure. How a Mitchell camera works is the film is pulled down and pins stick into the film. Now, it's incredibly precise. It has to be or it wouldn't work at all.
Right.
You know, any amount of flutter is not acceptable. So it's incredibly precise, but maybe 1/10,000th of an inch, not quite as precise as the Bell & Howell camera, which is why those cameras became optical devices, which is the way they did visual effects back then, was by combining things in an optical camera, not on a computer. So it's extraordinary and hard to believe, frankly, for me, that these things could be made to run with such accuracy and precision. But I've shot, you know, dozens of films on motion picture film myself. And I will tell you this, there is something very comforting when you're shooting of turning the switch on and hearing through the blimp just a light purr of the film running through the camera. It's really cool, man. It's something that I probably miss the most, aside from just the look of film. Film has its own look. You know, digital capturing today, the imaging process is spectacular, right? You get some absolutely extraordinary images. Film had its own thing. And, you know, the film look can never really be achieved on digital. It's a different thing. You know, I mean, you're exposing silver and you're exploding that silver and then processing it and then projecting it versus recording a digital image. They're two different things. But I have to say, given the opportunity, I think I lean more towards digital imaging today than film imaging, simply because of the amount of problems that can occur with this.
Right.
You know, a hair in the gate, which is something you don't hear anything about these days, but you used to hear a lot, meant that a tiny piece of film had, of the emulsion probably, had been scratched loose from film, and it would grow because, you know, it was hanging there and the film was going past and it was building up, and it would hang down into the image area and you would see it. And that's a nightmare. When you go to, before digital could fix that easily, you had to probably reshoot, or they had to do an optical push in to get past it. And I remember you used to go in the morning before you would shoot the next day's work and look at the dailies from the previous day. And first of all, it was terrifying waiting just to see things come up on the screen. You're like, oh my God, was there even an image, right? Then once it comes up, you have a sigh of relief. And then maybe there's the hair in the gate, a light leak.
Right.
A light leak? That's horrible. You know, I had a light leak once with a camera where the assistant had screwed the mounting screw too far up into the camera and poked a tiny hole in the camera. And later in the day, I was doing some handheld stuff, which allowed that hole to be, you know, out in the world, and we got a notice from the lab, you got a light leak. I'm like, how could that happen? And we couldn't figure it out. Finally, the assistant looked up in there where he had screwed the screw in too tight, and that's where it happens. Everybody wanted widescreen. There was Cinerama, there was VistaVision, and there was Cinemascope.
So we weren't at 16:9 yet. We were at 235. We were
240. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. And so 20th Century Fox needed their own widescreen format. Someone at Fox had been in France and had seen this device that was created by Henri Chrétien, which was an anamorphic device, which in essence sees a wide field of view and squeezes that field of view onto the motion picture negative.
Right.
Then in projection, you would have a print that was squeezed and you would have a projection lens that unsqueezed it and made it widescreen. Okay, so you're able to get a big widescreen image onto a normal piece of film.
So with digital, we would tell the editing program, hey, I'm using, unsqueeze this, you squeeze this.
Exactly.
But for them, they had to optically
It was an optical thing, going in and coming out. And this is the Cinemascope device. Okay, so this is a very early 20th Century Fox one. I'm going to slide the matte box out so you can see it. There we go. And if you look at it, you could see the anamorphosis.
Oh, yeah. So what we're looking at is a device in front of
A regular spherical
regular
lens. When we look at the Criterion device, you'll see it squeezes and then goes into the normal motion picture lens and goes in there. Here's a problem. You had to focus this lens and this lens independently.
So what is the process for focusing? Like, are you focusing one element, or are you just looking at numbers?
They generally would have two assistants.
Okay.
Yeah, you run a tape, right?
Yeah.
And you get this set. This normally has this follow focus here. See this?
So that's running the rear.
Yeah, this is
main
doing
lens.
the main lens. And then the other assistant would stand there and do this.
Jeez.
One of the films that was shot on this type of a device, the Cinemascope lens, was a movie called The Robe. And now if you look at these films, you can notice that they didn't really know what to do with this wide angle in the beginning. A lot of times they just had wasted space over on the edge of the frame. They would have their main image, and then there'd just be space for no other reason. It took a little bit of time for people to conceive of composing with this new aspect ratio. The aspect ratio is the height to the width.
And what are they looking at are they looking at a reflex that's showing that widescreen, or are they just guessing?
When they're shooting,
Yeah.
they have a viewfinder with an anamorphic type device on the
so
front.
they're seeing representation of what
That's
that would be
right.
captured.
That's right. Now remember, there weren't any monitors back then.
Right.
You know, we've gotten really complacent having monitors all over the place. There's monitors for hair and makeup. There's monitors at Village.
Everyone with an iPad has a monitor.
Everybody's got a monitor, right? The executives can turn their iPhone on and watch it as we're shooting. These guys didn't even have a monitor. The only person that really knew what they were getting was the operator.
Right.
But if you look at those old pictures, you'll notice very often the director is right underneath the lens, so he can see with his eyes essentially what he's getting.
Wow.
You know, cinematographers hung out down here too. They all got to be really good friends. This type of device won the country over. You know, this was big, and of course Paramount's VistaVision was really big. We're going to have a look at one of those, and then there was Cinerama. So the guys from Fox wanted widescreen, and one of their employees had been in Paris and had seen an exhibition of this device. This is the original anamorphic device. This was designed by a man named Henri Criterion. This device went in front of a regular spherical lens and squeezed an image down. And then upon projection, you would de-squeeze and have an anamorphic image.
So
You're holding it.
Were anamorphic lenses not a thing yet?
No, it's not until the 1920s.
Wow.
See, Henri Criterion actually saw Napoleon Vupar Abel Gance, which was shot in a triptych fashion with 3 cameras. And he said there has to be a better way to get a widescreen than to have to use 3 separate cameras.
Right.
And he developed this device.
And what is this meter on the?
That's focus.
That's okay. Yeah. Oh, because you had to focus both.
Yeah. This would do what a modern day anamorphic lens can do. Just a little more work to keep both lenses in focus.
Right. And I think
it really works.
A lot of people, I think of like widescreen or like 16:9. They kind of just think of the image being cropped, but like when you really look at it, the image is just being squeezed in, and you're using that entire film frame. So you're not wasting anything.
No, that's right.
Getting a larger scope.
Let's look at him. Can we get a squeeze there?
Yeah, here, let me.
Yeah, you have to manhandle it.
Yeah, you could probably get away with unsqueezing that in post.
Really? What is it, 1.5?
Probably 2.
2?
I would assume.
Yeah, that's a 2.
I've only used 2s.
That's pretty funny.
Wow.
Yeah, well, it really works with a motion picture lens.
Yeah.
All right, we already looked at this one, remember? The Cinemascope lens?
Right.
That was on the camera. You can have a peek, though, just for your own jollies.
Oh, wow. It looks a lot cleaner than the other one. A little newer.
Yeah, it's about 30 years newer.
Wow.
And then you could do music video style.
Yeah.
So this part would just back right up against a regular motion picture prime lens. And Cinemascope, made by Bosch and Lomb.
Is that all it really does? Is just contact, just press up against it? And
Yeah, well, it goes, you know, the older lenses, a lot of lenses are deeper in the barrel
Right.
to prevent flare. So this would just go into the barrel.
Right into the barrel.
Yeah. I teased you earlier about a guy who invented the sport of water skiing. All right, so he invented water skiing, and then he wanted a way to advertise his water skiing. So he got a Arri 2C camera and an ingenue 14 millimeter retro focus lens, and he got in the back of the boat, and he had his girls out there in their bikinis, and they were doing the building the pyramid, standing on each other's shoulders and all. And he put that 14 mil up, and it was like really wide, and they were really small. So he thought about it for a long time, and he came up with the idea that if he utilized 3 individual cameras in one, right? There's actually 3 cameras.
Wow.
On the Cinerama camera, 1, 2, 3.
So these are the cameras just bolted in.
That's right. So one camera shoots directly forward, this camera shoots across this way, and this camera shoots across this way. That if he did that and used the same lens on all 3 cameras, which is a 27 millimeter Bosch and Lum, that he could get a really wide angle of view and still be close enough to the subjects to make them not tiny.
Right.
And it worked. Cinerama was fantastic, and it looked great. When they saw the results, they're like, well, wait a minute, let's do something else. So they bolted it onto a roller coaster, right? So now you've got this widescreen view that people in the audience can watch of a camera going over the big roller coasters in New Jersey, which was mind-blowing. And he put it all together in a film called This is Cinerama. Okay? And that film was in the top 10 grossing pictures of the year 1953.
Wow.
Yeah. Remember, this is the years when people were staying home and watching I Love Lucy. They weren't going to the movie theaters. So all the other companies took notice, and they said, hey, this guy might be onto something. The widescreen is where it's at. So this camera, this one, worked on the motion picture called How the West Was Won.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that film, if you watch it and see it in widescreen format, you could see the faint lines where each of these film planes overlap.
This is version 1 of this? Did they make more?
This is the version.
This is Cinerama.
So after this, other widescreen things started coming out, like Cinemascope, like VistaVision for Paramount, like Todd AO system, right? Now, the Paramount VistaVision system, they had been using more of these Stein cameras and using them in a vertical 8 perforation frame for their visual effects.
Right.
The head of their visual effects, a guy named Farcio Edouard, was an Academy Award winning amazing man. They had this thought, what if we just took that and turned it this way? And the full frame image, which is what it creates, just like a modern day full frame 8 perforation camera, fits 1:8:5 aspect ratio perfectly. So Paramount started shooting these wide frame, full frame movies, but there's a problem. You need a projector system to project those. Unfortunately, a VistaVision projector was a really, really expensive device. So most theaters said no. So what ended up happening was Paramount would originate and shoot their negatives on the VistaVision format and then do reduction printing to a regular 35 millimeter size print, and they looked astonishing.
Wow, so you're like downsampling basically.
That's
you're
right.
Shooting this 8 perf larger
monster,
size.
and then making an optical down to the regular size, and it was super sharp, super beautiful. And this carried on. If you look at the work of Richard Edlund ASC, for instance, on Star Wars, the first 3 Star Wars movies, he utilized the VistaVision frame for the multi-passes that they had to make to, for instance, bring a X-Wing fighter through the frame or any of the battles. He utilized that VistaVision frame because it was a big negative to start with, right? He'd take it from the big negative and then reduce it down to regular 35 millimeter for projection.
Interesting. So it's almost like when you shoot like 8K or something for visual effects to work on.
That's right.
You're just using VistaVision.
It's exactly the same.
Wow.
It is exactly the same. This is Mitchell VistaVision number 3. And as you can see, it's a larger camera. 2,000 foot magazines. Why? Well, because they're shooting double frames,
you're losing a lot of real estate there.
This gives them the same time as a 1,000 foot magazine on a regular camera, okay? So the negative starts this way, it goes up through here, and then it turns horizontal.
So the negatives turn, because the VistaVision cameras I've seen, your reels are actually
Right.
horizontal.
Like that, right?
But
Yeah,
the film is
butterfly.
turning, keeping the...
That's right.
this.
It's
Oh,
going
very
that
cool.
way. Cool, huh?
Yeah, that seems...
Yeah, this camera is VistaVision number 3. This camera went to Egypt with Cecil B. DeMille and shot the 10 Commandments.
Wow.
Yeah, this camera also worked with Alfred Hitchcock on North by Northwest. This camera also worked with Alfred Hitchcock on Vertigo.
Right, and most of these movies, if not all of them, were not projected in VistaVision.
That's correct. Only at the Paramount theaters, the ones that Paramount owned, they had the money to put those projectors
that'd
in,
be cool to
which
see.
would have been amazing, right? Because remember, it's running this way. So
Right.
if there was a scratch or dust, it'd go that way instead.
Oh.
I just love this camera. It has so much history, and it has so much meaning to me because I, in my previous career, had worked at the laboratory at Paramount Pictures. So when I took over the museum, I decided that I wanted to find the most famous cameras in the world to exhibit here. They weren't here. And after much searching, I found this camera. This is Mitchell B&C number 2, and this camera was owned by Samuel Goldwyn and was utilized by his pet cinematographer, Greg Toland ASC, on a number of incredible films. Wuthering Heights, Citizen Kane, Best Years of Our Lives, Grapes of Wrath, to name a few.
This camera specifically.
This
one.
camera. I found this camera. It was down in Miami, Florida, in a storage unit. I got it here. Some things have been changed internally. We rectified that. It had been painted blue. Here you can see the camera painted blue. It's in my backyard right there. It was originally this wrinkle finish that you see on it now. It took many years to find a source, and that's another story of how I got this camera refinished. But ultimately, it ended up being completely refinished. And so there it is. I mean, that's the camera that shot Citizen Kane. I mean, that is Orson Welles looking through that camera right there. This is the Pathé camera that Billy Bitzer used with D.W. Griffith for Birth of a Nation and Intolerance and Broken Blossoms. As a matter of fact, here is Billy Bitzer with this camera and D.W. Griffith sitting in front of it.
Jeez.
D.W. Griffith, who with this camera invented the feature-length motion picture.
Right.
Before that, they were one-reelers,
Yep.
right? He decided to put them together and make multi-reel movies with this camera, Billy Bitzer's Pathé camera. Billy Bitzer is also the person that came up with putting a big still lens iris in front of his lens to use as a sunshade.
Oh.
You know, that's where this initially came from. It initially came from, he thought if he took an iris and put it out on a tin can, not kidding, a tin can, in front of his lens, he liked shooting his leads in backlight, with the sun backlighting. And as the sun dropped, it came more and more into the lens. So he utilized this iris as a sunblock. Problem was, and he didn't realize this, was that as he stopped his lens down, as it got brighter, it started to vignette. Right? When Griffith saw it, rather than making a fuss and making it a mistake, he said, "You've innovated an absolutely new technique." As a matter of fact, a technique that we still use today, modern day cinematographers still like a little vignette on the edge of our frames. It draws the eye more towards the center of the frame.
Right. He was just trying to make a
sunshade.
A map box.
That's right. That's right. And then, of course, from there, they started irising in and out on scenes. You know, you could open a scene by opening the iris and close a scene by closing, or as was used very often by Chaplin, you could iris a specific part of the frame, just so the people knew you're supposed to look there.
Right.
You know? And
So that's a taste of the technical significance of this camera. With it, D.W. Griffith and Billy Bitzer pioneered revolutionary filmmaking techniques that pushed the language of film forward by leaps and bounds. A lot of those techniques are still used today. But we do need to also address the cultural history and dual legacy that Griffith left behind. D.W. Griffith was an avowed racist, and Birth of the Nation, arguably one of the most racist films ever made, would later go on to become a recruitment tool for the KKK. This film introduced revolutionary filmmaking techniques that are still in use, and it was also extraordinarily damaging to the nation and its peoples. Both of these things are true. This is a camera that you would still see today.
Yeah, it's a Panavision Platinum camera. It's a premier 35 millimeter motion picture camera. It's absolutely silent, and it is absolutely perfection when it comes to exposing a negative. But what is really special about Panavision are their lenses.
Oh, yeah.
You know, their lenses are renowned, world renowned, for their beauty and their ability to operate in harsh conditions and not have any optical issues like flares. So I have been a fan of Panavision cameras my entire career. I still am, even though I shoot primarily on digital these days. But if I were gonna go for a film project, I would almost definitely be using the Panavision camera. You can trust it.
Yeah, now we're starting to see all the modern bells and whistles, right? Your focus wheels.
Here's follow focus.
It seems like something you can put on the shoulder if you really needed to.
Yeah, this can easily, without a 2,000-foot magazine, you know, you can rear mount the mag on this.
Right, I've seen those on dollies.
Makes it really easy, you know? And this is actually even ancient now because obviously all the focusing is wireless now, right? So there'll be a motor mounted onto here, onto iris rods. Yeah, I've been a blessed human being that I've been able to do something that I truly love for a living and that is provided for myself and my family. And doubly blessed by being the curator here at the museum, being able to preserve all of these relics for the future. You know, there's going to be a time when we're not using something like this. Right. It's important to hold on to these things and hold on to the stories of these things so that filmmakers coming up in the future have a point of reference. Yeah. You know, without understanding the past, it's hard to go forward and create new. Oh, yeah. You need to have a bit of a history in your mind of how things have been done and how to do things in order to move forward and innovate into new realms. I'm helping curate all of these amazing old articles and keep them in-house, and I love showing them to people. I'm really happy you guys came by today.
Yeah,
really
thanks so much for having us. This has been amazing.
It's incredible, you know. Hopefully we'll be here for a long time, and when you're in town, just give me a call, come by, you know.
Awesome. Steve, thank you, sir.
Hey man, it's my pleasure, I love it.
Thank you so much to Steve Gaynor and the ASC for opening your doors to us and allowing us to come toward this amazing collection. Now, as I mentioned before, this is not on public display, but if you go to the ASC website, they have some great documentation and photographs on a lot of these cameras. It's a really great read. Until then, we'll see you next time. Bye.